So within the USDA, I also work for the APHIS, which is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services. And then under that branch, I work under VS, Veterinary Services. So all the acronyms that is government work. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit today about if you're interested in being a veterinarian. I'll just cover real briefly kind of how you might prepare for that, things you can do in school, things you can do in college to kind of help you prepare. Different roles that you might see or take on, or just openings that you might want to think about. I know when I first started working as a veterinarian, let alone wanting to be a veterinarian, this is not where I thought I would end up by any means. So it's always good to keep an open mind and be open to different challenges or different scenarios you might run into that might change your mind, and they can be good things. So we'll kind of run through that. If we get through it fairly quickly and you guys have questions, we can certainly answer those. Again, without there being too many of us, if you have questions along the way, feel free to either just unmute and ask or raise your hand, whatever you guys are comfortable doing. What kind of age range are we working with today?
I'm 17 and
I'm 14.
14.
Okay.
I'm 13.
13? Okay, so 13 to 18-ish range. Good. All right. So some of you guys are going to be in middle school then. Some of you guys are, is it all high school? I can't remember I think I was 14 when I started high school.
He's still in middle school, and I just graduated. So.
Gotcha. Okay, good. So we've kind of got a good spectrum. So I'm going to stop my video, and I'm going to attempt to share my screen so I can show you guys a PowerPoint. So bear with me as I work through that. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Very good. Okay. I'm going to try to change it over to the PowerPoint presentation part so that it's not the whole screen. Is that working? Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So like I said, if you guys have questions, I can't necessarily see you while I have this on. So feel free to just ask or interrupt or however we need to do that to make sure we get your questions answered. Whether you're in middle school, high school, all of those things, it's always a good idea to volunteer. So this can be a veterinarian that you either know or use or is nearby. It's always a good idea to have mentors. So what is a mentor, and what things can they help you with or provide for you? Mentors can help answer questions. Those can be in life in general. Those can be for classes that are good to enroll in. Those can be for different activities or things that you can get into. A mentor just kind of fills all those roles and helps to kind of guide you into good choices that can set you up for success. Extracurricular activities. So what that could be, it's not just sports, that can also be things within a church or small group. The different organizations, like if you do like how you guys are in 4-H, or if you have like the Scouts, things like that. Whenever vet schools are looking for applicants, they want a well-rounded individual. We definitely want to make good grades, but we also have to show we've thought about this, we've maybe even worked in it before, and that we're well-rounded. So it's not just that we do this one thing only, but we have a multitude of things that show that we are, as a person, have a lot of enrichment in our life and things that kind of give us perspective. Leadership roles are always nice. Again, whether that's through your school, through your job, through 4-H or other clubs that you might be in, showing that you're able to kind of take on that leadership role and show initiative and that you can lead and direct is always a good thing, because as a veterinarian, almost any job you take, whatever that may look like, you're going to be in some way, shape, or form a boss or a supervisor. So they like to see that. And of course, we have to say study, 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 because vet school's hard. It's definitely not easy. So we want to make sure that you're well prepared and you know how to study and how to make those good study habits. For admissions, now I do have O State on here. I am an Oklahoma State graduate. I went there for both undergrad and vet school. So I'm not in any way trying to sway you all, but it's the one I know the most because that's where I went. So these are last that I checked. Of course, these are always subject to change. Different schools may update these. So if you want most up to date at any time, whether now or 5 years down the road or whenever, you can go to, you can Google the Oklahoma State Vet Med. It'll pull up their homepage for you and it will tell you all of the things that you need for admissions. But last I checked, they were at a GPA of at least 2.8. So again, with that studying, that's no D's. You will have to take the graduate record exam, also shortened to a GRE. New as of 2020 was the Casper test. And then you will apply through the VMCAS system. Those applications are usually due kind of early in that fall semester. So if I remember correctly, I want to say like September, October. There's the application itself. There's a fee to apply. There are evaluations by people that they will fill out for you and either send in, I think individually, your transcripts from your schools, and then those test scores for those 2 tests that we talked about. That application is quite lengthy. So it's definitely something that if you want to apply for vet school, you're going to want to start on that early so that you have time to fill that out, to write your application, to make your essays, and to gather those evaluations together. The interviews themselves for vet school are usually happening in the early spring semester. So for instance, when you get to college and you get to your 3rd year or 4th year of undergrad, that's when you would start applying for vet school. So you're actually applying for it before you finish or graduate. But hopefully it's an attempt that you'll be graduating soon. So you're just trying to line up that next step. Once you are accepted or maybe even used as an alternate, you will get that acceptance letter to let you know that you've made it to that next point. So with a traditional veterinary career, these are the ones that most people know because it is traditional. It's that most common one. So you've got a small animal practitioner, large animal practitioner. Small animal can be cats, dogs, rabbit type thing. Your large animal is typically going to be like specifically horses, cattle, and then you have the mixed animal that kind of does everything in between. Here in the last 10 years, we've seen an increase in the exotics veterinarians. So that's going to be because people have all kinds of pets nowadays. That might entail as the variety of different birds, again, your rabbits, lizards, snakes, your pocket pets, things like that would be considered exotic. And then you have wildlife. Your wildlife is going to be, your deers, your zebu, farms like that, and could even encompass your zoo life. So, if you go to the zoo and you're seeing, the zebras, giraffes, things like that, there'll be a mix between exotic and wildlife. And then you have specialization. So just like in the human world, the veterinary world will have things you can specialize in: orthopedic surgery, soft tissue surgery, general practitioner, anesthesia, all of those type of things. You can specialize and do just that bit that you like. It does take more work and it does take more school and time. Here's a few slides of some of the various little animals I've got to work with over the years. You can see here, this is a mini donkey. This is a bobcat. This is a huge calf that we had to pull and was still alive. And this is a camel. So just kind of some fun things sometimes that you get to see or do. And then these are some more little fun things. So this is my dog Bryce. He's a Frenchie, and we've got roosters and zebra. These are fun stuff. And then there's days like these where you just kind of get into. Some days you get lucky and you get to have C-sections, or you get to help out with the birth of babies. That's always a fun day. Those aren't as often or as common as we wish they were, but boy, is it fun to play with those babies. Occasionally we get some rough and rowdy crowds. I'll see if this will play for you. So as you can see there, we had a bull that kind of got their head stuck, was all upset, was running around the pen. You do have to be aware of the dangers and the pinch points in the job. So especially with our larger animals, where we often will use squeeze shoots or tranquilizers to help calm them down or safely restrain them. These are things you have to be aware of, not only for your safety, but for the animal too. There are also non-traditional career paths. So these are things that you may not be aware of, or that the general public isn't quite as aware of. So there's jobs like mine, which are within the government, and they are public service jobs. There's also research. A lot of the research can be through schools. They can be through private sector, like with the pet food companies and whatnot. And then the pet food companies will also bridge you over into the industry. So whenever maybe you work for a pharmaceutical company, the academia within the schools. So again, the teachers at the vet school themselves, not only do they teach, but they do still practice and they do still work. And they also have grants and things that they try to continuously learn new things and help with new progressive treatments and approaches for different surgeries and whatnot. You have associations, so those usually work hand in hand with the industry. They're the more kind of political side of the industry that works with lawmakers and regulation. And your military. So there are career paths within the military, specifically for veterinarians. There's also the nonprofit organizations. So some of those might be, you know, if there's like a specialized, like a petting zoo or a specialized farm or an exotics area where they're nonprofit and they're there to help to teach or expand information for people with certain species. Are there any questions on either of those things so far? Okay. So I'm going to kind of dive into my specific area that I'm working in right now. And so like I said earlier, I work for the United States Department of Ag, which is the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services, and then within veterinary services. So veterinary services still has even more options underneath it for things that you could do. I work within the veterinary export trade services. So what that means is that anytime people want to leave the country with pets, or maybe they want to ship genetics, or they want to ship cattle, horses, pigs, goats, you name it. If it's an animal and it's leaving the US, they work with us and through us. That will also encompass products and byproducts. So bones, serum, hides, eggs, you know, things like that, that will also go through us. There's also the district or field staff. As it sounds like, they work within the field itself. They will do inspections. They will look at animals. They will look at product facilities. They also help to make sure that we keep an eye on possible foreign animal diseases. So if we get a particular animal that has a lesion that's a suspect to be something that's not a common disease that we see here in the US, they will alert their state officials, who then work in hand with us to go out and take samples and look at that animal and make sure that we don't have a new or emerging disease that we need to get under control. There's port services. So those work at the ports, which could be land, air, or sea. And they work with animals both coming in and out of the US. Strategy and policy work around our Washington, D.C. area, and they actually help to make the regulations and to create a bilaterally agreed certificate for both our country and others that we're trying to send to. And then there's the diagnostics and biologics group. They're the ones who run our labs, whether it's a state-ran lab or a national lab like the National Vet Service Laboratory, and they make sure that we can have a safe and regulated place to send our samples and to send our findings to, so that we can find out what it is that we're working with. So you can see here these ladies are in their Tyvek suits. Occasionally, whenever we're working with a disease or something that we're worried about spreading, we will use, this is called PPE. It's personal protective equipment. And so we'll make sure that we take precautions so that we stay safe as well as the animals do while we're looking into these different diseases. Here you can see me using that wand that's in my hand, has a reader on the end of it, like a chip reader. And that's a bison that was imported from Canada. And so once those bison arrived, there was about 112 of them. They were unloaded from the trucks, the semi trucks. They were allowed to rest and have water and food and whatnot. And then we ran them through some very large, very thick chutes into that head gate there that's holding them. It's not choking them. That is a young one. That's a young little bison. And they had chip readers in their ears, kind of like we microchip our pets. And so I was using that wand to scan over their ears so that we could check the IDs to make sure that all of the animals that were unloaded were the correct ones that were on the health certificate. Here's some deer that these were being exported. So those were leaving to go to another country. There you can see Dr. Biggs with a young camel that came in. This is drawing blood from pigs. You can see Dr. Herons in that red shirt there. He used to work for the State Department here in Oklahoma, but he now works with us here in the federal office. And down there at the bottom is Dr. Pruitt, and he was also collecting blood samples from those bison. So Veterinary Export Trade Services, where I work, works with the imports and exports of both your live animals and the animal products that they make. And again, those products can be like milk, different dairy, even like mayonnaise, things that have milk or animal origin products that you might not think about. We do inspections, both at facilities like a pet food plant, as well as any other kind of product facilities. We do pre-export isolations. So what you can see there in that picture, those are cattle that are loaded on a ship. So think if you've ever seen or been on a cruise ship and floors and floors of cattle. So they're very specific on the amount of room, fresh water, ventilation, and amount of food and feed that they have on the ship so that they can take them overseas. We also will inspect approved establishments. So those are places that will take in taxidermy. So if you ever go to another country and say you like to go hunting and you want to bring back a trophy, that trophy would then be sent to an approved establishment. Again, to make sure that we don't bring any kind of diseases or bugs or things that we don't need or want here in the US. And then lastly, we also will inspect germplasms. So those would be semen and embryos to make sure that we have genetics. Within 4-H, some of you guys might be familiar with what that looks like as far as, showing animals. When you have a really good show animal, you want to make sure that we capture those genetics and use them to make sure we keep those breeds and species to that standard. Here we've got some elephants. Elephants imported, I want to say this was about 4 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. These elephants are from South Africa. They were part of a very large group of elephants that were sent to the US, and they spread the elephants out around 4 different zoos. These animals, these elephants, were living in an area that they would be in danger. It wasn't like a reserve or an area where they were protected. So they round the elephants up so that they would not be hunted or taken down for their ivory, and they were sent to zoos. So these are wild animals that were moved from their containment area so that they wouldn't be in harm. They were brought in, they were sprayed. You can see kind of some people in the background with the Tyvek on, and there's like a long nozzle. They're spraying them for ticks and fleas, so an external parasite control. This was kind of a young elephant here. And we were looking at them to make sure that they were good to be brought in. Here you see some zebras. These guys are from the US, born and raised in captivity, and they were going to a zoo in the Philippines. So I got to go out and kind of see and meet these guys and look at the crates that they would be sent in to go overseas to the Philippines at a zoo there. All kinds of fun stuff that we get to see and do. Porcupines, shorthorn cattle. This is we call it a mushroom. It's an outer tube. On the inside of that is another big canister that has, it has nitrogen in it. And so that freezes the semen and or embryos that we're sending. This is an albino baby kangaroo, and that's a big guy kangaroo. Here's what a non-albino pair looks like. And this over here, these were African gray parrots that were imported. We had to keep them in isolation once they arrived for at least 30 days so that we could watch and make sure, again, that there were no parasites that were not needed and that none of them showed any signs of health concerns. Once they got through that 30 days, everybody was alive and healthy. We had no issues or problems. They were then released to be sold at pet stores and for personal pets and research. Here's what it looks like when animals are being exported. They have all kinds of different crates, stalls, boxes, things like that that they'll be loaded up in. So you can see there's a big variation there as far as what it looks like getting them into the ships or into the planes. So that bottom left, a group of horses you can see there, that's within a ship. But the bottom right, that's called a stall box, and that is what they will put horses in when they fly in a plane. The top left are cattle on a ship as well. Top right is how the wranglers, so the men, would push them through to check them one last time, make sure everybody's healthy, everybody's good to go, and load them onto the ship into those pens. Occasionally, there are natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes, earthquakes, and things that happen. And when those happen, sometimes we get called out to help respond to that, to help gather those animals, to make sure that they are okay. So it's an unfortunate side of thing, but it does happen, and it is a really interesting part of the job to get to go out there and help make sure that these animals are safe and they are healthy. This picture is from the Bureau of Land Management. So a lot of these horses are going to be wild. You'll see them, in Utah, Wyoming, kind of areas where they run free. They're very large open herds, usually Mustangs. And so the Bureau of Land Management every so often will have a humane roundup where they bring them in and they do it so they can make sure that hooves aren't overgrown, that we don't have any that are underfed or emaciated. Everybody looks healthy, and we can just kind of keep an eye on the herd to make sure that everything looks good. There's an aerial view of how they're pushing those horses up. So you can see they've kind of gathered them from this big open range, and then they slowly kind of bottleneck them down, squeeze them down so they come into a pen. Do you guys have any questions about any of that? This big girl that I'm on here, she's a draft horse, and her name is Miss May. And I have very long arms. I'm not a very tall person, but I have really long arms. And I could just barely get my hands around that big old neck of her to give her a big hug. She was a fun girl. That was up in Montana. If you guys don't have any questions about any of those things or applications, things you can do to get ready, questions about any of that. Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you get to travel a lot with your job?
Before COVID, we did get to travel a little bit more. It's not mandatory by any means. They don't make us travel, but we did have trainings and we would get to go do, with those inspections, we would get to travel and go see some things. Obviously, with the last, year or two, year and a half or so with COVID going on, we've pretty much shut down travel unless it's a absolute have to basis. But we're hoping as everybody continues to get vaccines and we continue to get people, back into a normal rhythm, we are hoping to resume that travel again. Now, that's just with my job in particular within export trade services. Some of our field folks, obviously, they have to travel quite a bit more because they're not necessarily in an office setting. But since they're more in a field setting, their duty station is considered their home. So almost every day they're going to be driving somewhere in their state to go do some sort of inspection or check out a disease or something to that effect.
Okay.
Good question. If you guys like, I can go over a small animal physical exam with you.
Yes,
So
that'd be great.
Yeah. These are things you can do at home with your dog. The poor animals or cats that belong to veterinarians or vet kids, they just bless their hearts. These are the main things that we look for. So whenever you go to do an exam on an animal, obviously you want to be very careful with any kind of body language they're telling you. So if you go to approach an animal and they tuck their tail or they lay their ears back or they show you their teeth and it's not smiling, these are signs that they can be a little bit aggressive. So you always want to make sure you're watching body language of any animal, not just small, but any animal. You want to watch their body language and you want to make sure that you're safe. If the animal will let you kind of touch and pet and pull and kind of tug on them a little, you should be okay. If you've got one that's a little bit fractious, you're probably not going to want to do that exam without a muzzle or something like that to make sure you don't get bit on accident out of a fear response. So the main things that we check when we're doing an exam on our small animals, I like to go from head to tail, literally. So I start by just looking at the animal when I walk up and we're looking at its coat, its skin, its nails, the tip of its nose, things like that. We're just looking to see, does our hair coat look good? Do we have any rashes or bumps? Do we have any areas where we've licked it raw or pulled out the hair? Are our toenails overgrown or does it look like, we've scratched something or popped one off, anything like that. So we just kind of start with the overall cursory look. And then I'll kind of pet him on the head and I'll take a look at the ears. I'll kind of even, how you'll lean down, give your dog a kiss or something like that. I'll kind of lean down like I'm talking to him, but what I'm actually doing is I'm smelling. I want to smell that animal to see, do we have any funky smells coming out of our ears? Does it smell yeasty, which is kind of a Frito chip smell? Not to ruin those for you. Do we have any redness? Do we have any oozing? And while I'm petting them, I'm going to kind of rub on that ear canal to make sure that doesn't seem sensitive or sore to them. I'm going to look at their eyes and make sure that they look clear and that we don't have any scratches or hair or anything like that or discharge, like little eye boogers or anything like that. Whenever I look at their mouth, how I'll do that is whether they've got a long nose or short nose, I just kind of scrub it. Again, like I'm just giving them a good pet. But what I'm actually doing is I'm lifting up that lip and I'm looking inside to see what our mucous membrane. So, above the teeth, there's that pink kind of line. And we're looking at that to see, are our teeth looking pretty good? Are our gums a good color? Does the mouth look overly dry or tacky or anything like that to let me know the animal's dehydrated or maybe not feeling good? At this point, you can put in a stethoscope if you own one and you listen to them breathe. Now, a lot of times when dogs are inside or if they're in a new place, they do get a little bit concerned. So they might be panting with their mouth open. So I'll just gently kind of close the mouth or put my, finger under their chin to close the mouth just long enough that I can hear the actual lungs and not just that heavy pant, because I want to make sure that the lungs sound clear and that we don't have any crackling, wheezing, or fluid sounds going on around the lungs. Now, while you're holding them, I'm petting them the whole time. So if you've ever noticed that your vet's petting on them and loving on them, half of that's because we just like loving on these babies. And half of that is because we're actually feeling with our fingers. We're feeling underneath that jaw. You can feel your own jaw at the back where the jaw kind of meets your throat. There's lymph nodes there. And if they're sick or not feeling good, those might be swollen and they'll feel like firm little nodules. They'll also be in the front, like where their shoulders are. Those are the up in the front there and underneath their armpits. So if you ever notice that your vet's kind of feeling all over the dog and petting everywhere, that's on purpose. We're using our fingers and we're feeling all around and we're trying to feel if we've got any lymph nodes or glands that are overly enlarged where they should not be. Next, I'll move on to those front legs and I'll literally pick up their foot and I'll kind of turn it over and look underneath, make sure our paw pads look clean and clear, nothing stuck between them. I'll wiggle their toes, make sure we don't have any problems or issues moving there. I'll bend their wrist, I'll bend their elbow, and then I'll move their shoulder. So I'm basically just doing a full range of motion just to make sure nothing is eliciting pain or causing them problems. Then I will move down to their belly. So I've listened to their lungs. Again, I'm going to use my hands. So I'm feeling and kind of pushing up gently on their stomach to make sure I don't feel anything hard or enlarged or out of place. And then I'm going to look at that tail. If they have one, not all breeds have much of a tail, but if they have that little tail, I'm going to pick it up, move it around again, just to make sure our spine's not hurting, our tail's not hurting, that everything on that rear end looks to be good. We don't have any abscesses or chewing or licking or anything constantly like that. So that's how we kind of do a physical exam from head to toe on our small animals. Do you guys have any questions about that? This is the last one I've got, and then after this, we can just kind of open it up for any other questions you guys might have. So with an equine, it's harder to do a bovine exam. That's the reason I don't have one of those. Cattle, we usually have to have in a chute, and it's going to be pretty similar to equine, just they're in a chute versus, freestanding with a head stall on. Same thing, we're going to look at their general appearance. We're going to walk up, we're going to kind of look at them, what their coat looks like, what their body position looks like. Horses and cattle, in my opinion, will kind of show you how they feel by how they hold their head. If a horse, especially because those are flight species, if a horse or a cow, you walk up and they've kind of got their head hanging low, and even as you approach them, they don't really want to pick that head up, that's already a really good indication they're not feeling good. Because those type of animals, if they were out in a pasture or out in a field somewhere, if they saw something approaching, they should have their head up and their ears pointed towards the thing that's coming at them, because they need to be looking at what's going to come get me. So if they're not wanting to raise that head, they're not pointing their ears towards you, in where you're coming from, that's probably a good indication that they're just not feeling great. We're going to listen to heart. We're going to listen to lungs. On a horse, those are gigantic and they're fairly easy to find. Even if you don't have a stethoscope, you can take your hand, and usually their heart's as big as your hand is. And you can kind of feel underneath on that left side behind what a lot of, it looks like their shoulder, but it's kind of that little elbow point that comes out. You can stick your hand underneath there and you'll be able to feel that heart beating up against the side of your hand. We'll take temperatures and we'll look at the mucous membrane. So the mucous membrane, again, is we're going to lift that lip up. So on a horse, it's really easy, because if you've ever had to twitch a horse before, you kind of grab that front muzzle, that little soft velvety part, and you can lift up and look underneath it. It should be a nice, bright pink color. So if it's more dingy, if it's kind of almost white, or if it looks what we call muddy, that might be some indication that we've got some cardiac issues, or we've got some poisoning or something like that. On horses, we're going to check digital pulses. So what that means is we're going to kind of run our hands down their legs. And so right before you get to the hoof, that bottom part that's hard that you hear them clip clop around with, we're going to press on those veins and arteries, and we're going to see if we've got a nice good pulse. And then we're also going to listen to gut sounds. Horses have a lot of intestine, and they should constantly have gut sounds. Gut sounds is exactly what that sounds like. If you've ever been hungry and your stomach goes and kind of talks to you, horses' stomachs, intestines, do that nonstop. So a lot of times if a horse comes in, they may be colicking. So a colic horse means something's going on in their intestines and it shouldn't be. Either it's blocked or it's twisted or they're all bound up. So if you go to listen to a horse, there's 4 areas you're going to listen for. You're going to listen high on the left, high on the right, low on the left, low on the right, because those are going to be different areas of the intestine, so both small and large. So if you ever get to one of those 4 areas and you're not hearing that gurgling or you're not hearing that movement, within a couple of seconds, that's another good indication that we probably need to look closer at that and make sure that we don't have something going on there. So those were kind of quick and fast explanations. There's certainly more to it. It's not quite that simple, but it does kind of give you a good starting point with that. Okay, I think I got that off there. So do you guys have any questions, maybe even outside of what we talked about on the PowerPoint there? Do you have other questions you just want to ask me while you've got me here?
I was going to ask, how many years of schooling did you have to go through?
Okay, so I took 4 years of undergrad, and then vet school is also 4 years. Some people will get into the EAP, Early Admittance Program, and so they may only have 3 years of undergrad that they do before they go into vet school. So I would assume you'll have a minimum of 7. I don't know that you can get in before the 3 years of undergrad. Certainly some take more. We even have some people that will graduate college and go into their career field and then decide one day, I think I want to go back and I want to be a veterinarian. So they'll come back and they'll take classes or they'll join vet school afterwards. So they could certainly be taking even more years, but usually 7 to 8 years. And that's just to graduate vet school as a general practitioner. So that's not specializing or going into anything particular.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. That's a lot of people will say, veterinarians, we are doctors. And so people will say, like you asked, how many years did you go to school? Well, I went to school for 8 years. Whoa, you're like a doctor. Yeah, I'm a doctor. Hence the thing at the beginning of my name. We are real doctors. We do actually receive a doctorate of veterinary medicine. And no matter what job you take, you will always be considered a doctor, no matter what you do.
Also, I was
We
gonna
like
ask, sorry, go ahead.
We like to be sassy in the vet world versus the human world. And we like to say we're a doctor and we treat more than one species.
That's funny.
If you, did you have a question?
Go ahead.
What would you do if there was like a dog or something that had like one of its legs or something was moving improperly, and it was like when they sat down, their legs would just come out sideways instead of sit forward like they're supposed to?
Sure. So if you, the first thing I start with is, are they setting funny because something's broken, or are they setting something because they're lazy? We have lazy sitters. So, most dogs will bend their knees and they sit, on their booty. Well, I have a dog, my Frenchie, that black and white one that you guys saw. He's a lazy sitter. He likes to sit on his hip. So when he sits down, he'll automatically flop his little feet out and they stick straight out to the side, and he rolls over and he sits on his hip. It's because he's lazy.
One of my dogs, he's actually right here. He'll either just like lay down on his belly or he'll just sit down normally. But ever since we got him, his hips have been a little weird. Like his legs would go out to the side, and they're not really supposed to do that. Especially since he's a dachshund, and dachshunds usually have like spine problems. We think that something might be wrong with his hips, and we were wondering if there was like any way we could like check, because we haven't really heard anything from our vet. Has said that it might just be like something wrong with his hip and it could just be a genetic thing. Just wanted to like hear from you too.
Yeah. So does he seem painful when he sits or does anything?
He just seems like he's clueless, like he that his legs are supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
Another dachshund too, and he's like his legs have never been that flexible.
Yeah. So dachshunds, definitely, yes, they get spine issues, but dachshunds are also chondrodystrophic. So meaning you'll see it a lot of times in bassets too. Those front legs, it's almost like they'll meet in the middle, right? They kind of scrunch up. And so sometimes they may have shallow sockets. So your shoulder and your hips are a ball and socket. Some animals, instead of it fitting, I don't know if y'all can see my hand. Some dogs have it fitting like this, where you've got a good, socket over the ball of the bone. It'll look more like this. So it's kind of shallow. So it moves a little bit more.
Oh, okay.
If he's not crying out in pain and he's not worried about it, I probably wouldn't be either. But you can definitely do how we talked about the physical exam. You can definitely take your hands and kind of run it down, feel his legs. I'm assuming your vet's already done that too. And kind of move their hips around. As long as it's not like loudly popping or dislocating, it's probably just a genetic default and he's just probably going to sit funny.
Okay.
Hannah, did you have another question earlier?
Yeah, do you have any thoughts on like being a vet tech instead of an actual doctor or anything?
Sure. So we definitely need vet techs just as bad as we need doctors. Just like in any hospital you walk into, we need the nurses just as bad as we need the doctors. I will tell you that the vet tech program is a shorter course. So instead of the 8 years to become the doctor, I believe the vet tech program is 2 years. It is at OSU OKC. They do have a vet tech program. And you can go into working. Certainly you can work at veterinary hospitals and not be a technician, officially like a licensed one. But I think if you become a licensed technician, you can leverage that with when you're negotiating your salary. If you can show and prove, like, I've had official training, I'm not just a kid. And I did this. I started at a veterinary hospital as soon as I turned 16. I started in the kennel, right? So I was changing out the poop and pee pads and washing down the kennels. I was washing clothes. I was scrubbing bowls. I was feeding and watering, because you got to start somewhere. And so I went from the kennel, and then I went to receptionist. I was up front. I was taking appointments and kind of answering easier questions over the phone, getting people in. And then I became a tech assistant, because I hadn't gone to school, so I couldn't be considered a tech, but I was a tech assistant. So I was helping restrain animals. I was helping give medications. I was getting to see the surgeries firsthand that the doctors were doing. So it kind of worked my way up through that. So I think definitely if you want to go the tech route versus the doctor route, absolutely, we need them. All doctors need a good tech. And even as when I first became a doctor, I was smart enough to know whenever I went into my first clinic to work, the first thing I did was buddy up with those nurses, those technicians that had worked there for years, because they know where everything is. They know the drill. So if I got, a little bit excited, or I got a little over my head or was overwhelmed, I could look to that technician and say, help me, and they could do that. So I have a lot of love and appreciation for my technicians, and I encourage, if that's something that you want to do, or maybe even start, like maybe you want to start at the tech part and then maybe later on go back to vet school to become the doctor. We had two people in our class that did that as well. Do you guys have any other questions? I know that was kind of quick. He says no way. All right, well, I'm glad that you guys are taking an interest in veterinary medicine. Certainly there are even more jobs out there that I didn't even brush on or cover, but we just like to make sure that everybody knows there definitely are, obviously not only is vet an option, but there's different options within veterinary medicine. So it's not always just dogs and cats, or, running cattle or whatnot. So I'm so glad that you guys took time today to listen to this, and hopefully it'll help you with other things that you endeavor in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today.
All right. Do you guys need anything else from me? All right. Easy peasy.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us today.
You bet. Hopefully we get to do these in person again sometime.
Yes, agreed. So,
All right, guys, well, I'll let you go.
thank you all. We'll see you next week for Workshop Wednesday.
Bye.